Thank you and welcome to the show this morning. The topic this morning is ministering in the streets of Nashville. And we have to talk about some of the activities among the people in Nashville to be ministered to by the two individuals that are with us today, Pastor K. Walker and Mr. T. Westmoreland. Marlowe, T. Marlowe, excuse me, Marlowe, and we're going to keep that in to indicate that Dr. Haney often makes mistakes, and though people can know it. But and so what we'll do, Mr. Marlowe, is to have you and Pastor Walker to talk about some of the activities that you've been involved in dealing with, dealing with the people in Nashville in ministering in the streets. But before we get into that, Pastor, as you know, we want the two of you to give us some information about your background, your education, and some of your experiences, and then we'll get into ministering in the streets by the end of this first segment.
Well, good morning, Dr. Haney, and thank you for having us on the show again. It's always a pleasure to be here. It's, as you say, informative session of comments. Pastor Kelvin L. Walker, I'm the associate pastor at Fairfield Missionary Baptist Church under our senior pastor, Howard Jones, Jr. And born right here in Nashville, Tennessee. Pretty good parents, and they raised me right. I didn't act right, but they did indeed raise me right. Instilled in me good work ethics and all of that stuff like that, but I went astray, got caught up on drugs and alcohol, and found myself running around in the streets, man, at a young age, and it eventually led to full-blown out drug addiction, which led me to being incarcerated in Tennessee State Prison System, you know, for a period of about 5 years of my life, just in and out of jails and institutions and things like that. But God got a hold to me back in 1986, on August 24th, 1986, snapped a 17-plus year drug addiction, called me from that into ministry, took me in seclusion, taught me some things, and just fed me spiritually. And I've been on the battlefield ever since. It's been 32 years now, working toward 33 years of just ministry and being set free. And, you know, and it's all about carrying the gospel.
And so you can tell us something about ministering in the streets today.
Ministering in the streets, on the streets, across the street.
Very good, everywhere.
Yes,
in other
sir.
words, where you might be able to reach those who have been neglected.
Yes, sir.
In a real sense. And of course, T. Marlowe is going to give us some information in reference to his background, education, and some of his experiences. And then we'll have an opportunity at the end of this segment to get into the second segment, which we'll talk about some of the other activities. Marlowe, what's your situation?
Thank you, Dr. A, for having me on your show today. My calling, I'm from Nashville, Tennessee, went to school in Nashville, Tennessee, had my share of ups and downs in the streets, prison life, the whole 9 yards. And my calling came in 2001 when I started my ministry. And up under today, up under our beloved Pastor Jones at Fairfield, I am going to, he's taking me through minister training there. And the rest is me ministering in the streets where we would get into. And I just thank God for using me.
And so, Pastor, in a real sense, you and Marlowe are dealing with individuals that are literally in the streets.
Yes, sir.
In a real sense. And you think that you ought to be able to provide us some information in reference to what is going on in the streets. I think we all watch television and we see a lot of activity in the streets, but very seldom is there any information in reference to ministering in the streets and how people are themselves trying to go there and bring people out and save people. And so when we come back, Mr. Marlowe, what we want you to do during this second segment is to tell us how you became involved in ministering in the streets. We'll have about 6 minutes to do that and talk about your involvement and some of the things that are on your mind in reference to doing that, and then Pastor Walker will have an opportunity to sort of close us out for the day. And so that's what we'll try to do in terms of bringing everybody together in reference to that. Of course, this segment will be followed later on by another show that will have Pastor Walker and I think Minister Waller.
Yes, sir.
Dealing with essentially the same kind of information. So what we're trying to do is to get as much information as we possibly can to perhaps give directions in reference to the gospel and the streets. And so what we'll do, we'll take our first commercial break, and we'll be back with this following this very, very short commercial break. But now this is our 8-minute segment, Pastor. Now, this is where take as much time as you want to dealing with this 8-minute segment.
Right.
And then, of course, Marlowe. That's right.
Yes.
T. Marlowe.
Yes.
Tim Marlowe will give us some information, Mr. Marlowe. And you see, do what you can, Mr. Marlowe. You see we're stumbling through. As long as I'm stumbling, I'm all right. You see, so just stumble with me. And essentially what we want to try to do is get as much information as we possibly can to the individuals we're working with, okay?
Talk about what you do, talk about the ministry, all that stuff, get it in there.
Okay.
Thank you and welcome back to the second segment of the show for today. We're talking to Pastor Kay Walker and Mr. Marlowe, Tim Marlowe, and they're giving us some information in reference to meeting people in the streets and how to bring these individuals into the gospel or into whatever kind of religion that they might be professing. And of course, let's see, Pastor, if we can have you to give us some information in reference to dealing with ministering in the streets.
All right, you know, Dr. Haney, a lot of time when you talk about the streets and things that's happening out here in society, when you talk about the streets, you know, the first thing pops into people's mind a lot of time is the evils that's taking place out there in the street. But then at the same time, Dr. Haney, there's a lot of hurt, there's a lot of pain, there's a lot of depression, there's a lot of frustration. There's a lot of things going on out there in the street. There's a lot of people in situations as a result of being in communities, man, where there's a lot of gun violence and stuff like that, that there's a sense of hopelessness, you know, and that's what people need a lot of. They need a lot of love and they need a lot of hope. And that's what, you know, it's all about taking ministry in the street and bringing that love and bringing that hope to people. And I met Minister Tim Marlowe some years ago when both he and I were running some programs out there dealing with people suffering and bringing them out of the streets and giving them another shot at living life on a better level. So, you know, I love to hear, you know, from him and his experiences and what he's done out there, because this is his show.
Well, very good. Okay, Mr. Marlowe, talk about some of your activities and how you became involved in the street ministry and any other thing that you think might be helpful in terms of giving direction this morning.
Okay. I started my ministry, which is called Spiritual Faith and Hope. And the hope part of it, HOPE, helping other people everywhere. That's hope to us. You know what I mean? No matter what walk of life you come from, especially in the streets, because I come from the streets, you know. And I had an opportunity, as Pastor Walker said, back in 2001, started a program, you know, and Spiritual Faith and Hope. And my wife and I, Vanessa Marlowe, we started this program to help people. We going to prison, getting people out of prison and giving them a place to live, giving them a second chance at life, you know. And when I really got touched about so many people in the streets, alcohol, drugs, robbing, crime, whatever. I come from that way of life, you know. So I got with my wife, prayed about it, and I was like, well, it's time to go back to the streets, because one thing that I know, that God can clean you up, you know, and send you back to get more people, you know what I mean? Because it ain't like that they're real bad people make bad choices, you know, in life, you know, because I was one of them, you know. And I'm like, when I go to the streets today, even today, you know, I do it every weekend, you know, and I target East Nashville on Trinity Lane. That's where a lot of swears it at.
Just to have a presence somewhere in there.
Right, right. So when I go out there, I tell the guys, our women, there's women out there too, my experience.
Your story.
My story, where I come from, and how I got delivered from the streets and what I'm doing now, you know, and that you too, you know what I mean? Whatever you want, how can I help? You know, that's what I'm out here for, to help. How can I help you to break this chain? You know, just break it, you know, because sometimes it's hard to break. You got to have it up here, you know. In the street ministry that I do, I give back, you know. We are coming up with a thing. We do events like every 4th of July weekend. We're starting back doing events for the kids in the community and showing them a different way of life, you know. And when I go to the prison and speak, when I speak out there, because you see a lot of guys in prison have kids, you know, and their kids is out there in the street without a father. So how can we make them fathers, you know what I mean? To get back to being a man, you know. So I've really focused on the street ministry in that part. And you have to be, it ain't like, Dr., you just can go out there and do that. You know, you got to come from a place, you know what I mean? I mean, because a lot of times you go out there, people don't want to hear about God. People don't want to hear about religion. People don't want to hear about this, that, and the other. You got to actually come from some place.
It's you representing the religion, and they see God in you if you're doing what you're supposed to do. Is that right, Reverend?
Yeah, that's pretty much how, I mean,